All right. You guys sent us a fascinating article, and this deep dive, let me tell you, it's going to be juicy. We're talking about Igor Sechin,
Ah, yes, Igor Sechin.
head of Rosneft, Russia's massive state-owned oil company, and his, shall we say, interesting lifestyle.
Interesting is one word for it. Lavish, extravagant, maybe even a little excessive.
Yeah, that about covers it. And the real question here is, where's all this money coming from?
Right. You'd think with all the resources Russia has, the wealth would be, spread around a bit more. But this article paints a very different picture.
So, for those who need a refresher, who exactly is Igor Sechin?
Well, he and Putin, they go way back, like all the way back to their days in Leningrad.
Okay, so like old buddies.
Yeah, you could say that. And as Putin rose through the ranks, Sechin was right there with him, gaining influence and power along the way. When Putin became president, guess who ended up in charge of the energy sector?
Second, I'm sensing a pattern here.
You got it. Eventually, he landed the top spot at Rosneft.
And Rosneft is a big deal, right?
Huge, one of the largest oil companies in the world. And this article suggests that Sechin might be using it, well, kind of like his personal piggy bank.
How so?
Well, the article points out that Sechin was very aggressive when it came to buying up assets for Rosneft, often paying way more than they were worth.
Interesting.
And then there's the fact that the Russian government, under Putin, of course, seems to have given Rosneft all sorts of special treatment, tax breaks, exemptions, you name it. It really makes you wonder, is Sechin just ridiculously well compensated, or is there something more going on here?
Okay, so we're talking potential corruption on a massive scale.
Potentially, yes. But then the article throws in this bombshell. Sechin has his own special forces.
Wait, what? Like his own private army?
Not exactly. This special forces is allegedly composed of young, attractive women, all on the Rosneft payroll.
Hold on, I'm intrigued. Go on.
So the article's authors, they got their hands on a leaked list of Rosneft employees, and they did some digging, cross-referencing names and photos with, get this, escort service websites and databases.
Wow, that's some serious investigative work.
It is. And what they found is pretty shocking.
Spill the tea. What did they find?
Okay, so they found a number of women with seemingly regular job titles at Rosneft, like chief specialist or advisor, who were also, at the same time, advertising on escort sites.
No way.
Yeah. There's one example, Alina, hired at 21 as a travel organizer with an unusually high salary for someone her age. Guess what?
She was on those websites too.
Bingo. Now, the article makes it clear that they respect a woman's right to choose her profession. However, it does raise questions about whether state funds are being used for, let's say, personal reasons.
Yeah, I could see how that would raise some eyebrows.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it gets even more complicated
Wow.
because the article then introduces us to Albina Ivanova, Sechin's quote-unquote special assistant. And judging by her Instagram, she's living a life most people can only dream of.
Let me guess. Designer clothes, exotic vacations, private jets, the works?
You nailed it. And that's not all. We're talking yachts, a collection of Hermes handbags worth over 100 million rubles, the whole 9 yards.
Hold up, 100 million rubles just on handbags.
That's what the article estimates, yeah.
That's a lot of rubles,
Yeah.
even for someone on a Rosneft salary. So what's the connection here? Is she just his girlfriend? Or is there something more to it?
Well, that's the million ruble question, isn't it?
Literally, maybe. So what does the article say?
They present some pretty compelling evidence that suggests it might be more than just a simple relationship.
Like what?
For starters, they uncovered a bunch of trips Albina and Sechin took together. London, Rome, South Africa, China, all documented on social media and in news reports.
Okay, so they travel together.
A lot. And get this, they even share the same insurance agent for their cars. All signs point to a very close relationship.
All right, so maybe they are a couple, but does that automatically mean something shady's going on?
Well, here's where it gets even more interesting. The article discovered that Albina's income goes beyond those fancy gifts and lavish trips.
You mean like another job?
You could say that. She's also receiving a salary from the independent petroleum company.
Hold up. 2 salaries from different companies. Now that's definitely raising some red flags. What is this independent petroleum company anyway?
It's run by a guy named Eduard Kudenatov, a close associate of, you guessed it, Sechin.
Of course.
And here's the kicker. Kudenatov is known to hold assets for Sechin, including, allegedly, Putin's yacht, the Scheherazade.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So we're talking about potentially more than just A girlfriend being spoiled here?
Right. It's starting to look like Albina could be part of a much bigger financial arrangement.
Okay, now I'm really starting to see where this is going. And the article doesn't stop there, does it?
Nope. They bring up another woman, Yulia Titova, also a former Rosneft employee, linked to say it with me, Sechin.
Sechin. It's like a broken record at this point.
Yeah.
What's the story with Yulia?
Well, she apparently lived in the same apartment Albina has now. And just like Albina, she received a salary from both Rosneft and IPC.
Come on, that's way too coincidental.
Exactly. And of course, she also traveled with Sechin before eventually getting married and leaving Rosneft.
So is the article suggesting there's a pattern here? Like Sechin is using company funds to, well, support a revolving door of romantic partners.
It's certainly a possibility, but then the article drops this bombshell, Sechin's actual salary. And it's a number that's hard to even fathom.
Okay, I gotta know. Hit me with it. What kind of salary are we talking about here?
According to a leaked tax database cited in the article, Sechin's 2024 salary was 4,590,450,554 rubles.
I don't even know what to say to that. Do you have a calculator handy? That's like, what, over 18 million rubles a day?
You got it, 18.5 million rubles per day. To put that into perspective, that's like 18 years worth of work for the average Russian.
That is insane.
It's just
It's actually insane. And there are even rumors of an even bigger payment, right? Something like 8.7 billion rubles.
Yeah, there's an unverified claim floating around out there about an 8.7 billion ruble payment to Sechin back in November 2023.
Man, we're talking about some serious money here.
Yeah.
But, something tells me this isn't just about Sechin and his crazy rich lifestyle. The article seems to be hinting at something much bigger.
You're picking up on it, yeah. This isn't just about one guy's extravagant spending. It's about potential systemic corruption within Putin's regime and the unchecked power of Russia's state-owned companies.
So they're basically saying that the system is rigged to benefit a select few.
That seems to be the argument they're making. They point out that Rosneft's board is full of high-ranking government officials. It implies that these officials are either directly involved in this potential corruption or are, at the very least, turning a blind eye to it.
And all of this is happening while everyday Russians are struggling to make ends meet. Rising oil prices, stagnant wages, lack of investment in basic services, the contrast is just staggering.
It is, and it's a contrast that the article really drives home. The luxurious lifestyles of Sechin and his circle versus the harsh realities faced by the majority of Russians. It raises a lot of questions about who's really benefiting from Russia's vast oil wealth.
Okay, I think I need a minute to process all of this. We've gone from Sechin's extravagant spending to potential corruption at the highest levels of the Russian government.
It's a lot to take in, that's for sure, and we're just getting started.
It's almost like they're flaunting it,
It's definitely brazen, there's no denying that. But it also begs the question, how has this gone on for so long? Wouldn't someone, somewhere, have blown the whistle by now?
You'd think so, right? I
Wow.
mean, it's not exactly a secret.
Well, we have to remember, we're dealing with Russia here. This isn't exactly a country known for its freedom of speech or tolerance of dissent.
Right, and then there's that whole thing about Sechin's special forces within the FSB. That can't be good for anyone who wants to speak out.
No, definitely not. The FSB, for those who don't know, is the Federal Security Service, essentially Russia's main intelligence agency. And having a direct line to them, as Sechin seems to, well, let's just say it sends a pretty chilling message to anyone who might think about crossing him.
It's like something out of a spy thriller, isn't it?
Mm.
But the fact that this information did come out, that someone leaked that list of Rosneft employees, it suggests that maybe there are cracks in the facade. Maybe some people are fed up enough to risk speaking out.
It's a glimmer of hope, for sure. It shows that even in a tightly controlled environment like Russia's, the truth can still find a way to surface.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Sechin, his wealth, his connections, but I keep thinking back to the article's point about the impact this is all having on everyday Russians.
Yeah, that's really the heart of the matter, isn't it?
Because at the end of the day, all this wealth, all this power, it's coming from Russia's natural resources, resources that should be benefiting the entire country.
Exactly. And the article argues that instead of those resources being used to improve the lives of ordinary Russians, they're being siphoned off to enrich a select few.
It's like this cruel irony,
Yeah.
The very thing that should be lifting people up is actually being used to keep them down.
That's a really good way to put it. And it's something the article really emphasizes. Corruption isn't just some abstract concept. It has real-world consequences.
So how does it actually affect people's lives? What are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, think about what happens when billions of rubles are potentially being diverted into lavish lifestyles and shady business deals. It means there's less money available for essential services like healthcare, education, infrastructure.
Right, so the things that people rely on to live a decent life.
Exactly. And on top of that, it can drive up the cost of basic necessities like food and fuel while wages remain stagnant.
So people are being squeezed from both sides.
That's right. They're paying more for everything while their incomes stay the same or even decrease. The gap between the rich and the poor widens, and it's the everyday citizens who end up bearing the brunt of it.
This deep dive started with us looking into Sechin's lavish lifestyle, but it's really become about so much more than that. Now we're talking about potential systemic corruption that could reach the highest levels of the Russian government.
It's been quite a journey, that's for sure, and we've only just scratched the surface.
There's still so much we don't know. Like, how deep does this actually go, and will anyone ever be held accountable?
Those are the million-ruble questions, aren't they? But the fact that we're even asking them, that this information is out there in the open, that's a huge step in the right direction.
So what can our listeners do if they want to get involved? Where do we even begin to address something this big?
Well, the first step is always education. The more people who understand what's happening, the more likely we are to see real change. So I encourage everyone to read the full article. We'll make sure to link it in the show notes and share it with anyone who might be interested. Knowledge is power, and the more we know, the more empowered we are to take action.
Right, so get informed, spread the word. What else?
Another important step is to support the organizations that are already doing the hard work on the ground. There are a lot of great groups out there fighting corruption and promoting transparency, both within Russia and internationally. We'll highlight some of those in the show notes as well, so check those out.
Yeah, donating to these organizations, even if it's just a small amount, can make a real difference.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's the power of our own voices. Don't be afraid to talk about these issues with your friends and family. Write to your elected officials. Use social media to raise awareness. Every little bit helps.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by something like this. It's like, what can one person really do? But you're right, those individual actions, when we all do them together, they can add up to something much bigger.
Exactly. And that's what we need to remember. We're not powerless. We have the power to demand better from our leaders, to hold them accountable, to fight for a more just and equitable world.
It's all about staying engaged, staying informed, and refusing to give up hope.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
It's kind of crazy to think about, right? You have this incredible wealth generated from Russia's oil and gas. It should be like a huge advantage, a way to improve the lives of all Russians.
It should be, you'd think. But the reality, as we've seen, is very different.
Yeah. And it really highlights that gap between the haves and the have-nots, doesn't it? On one hand, you have this small elite circle living these extravagant lifestyles, and on the other hand, you have the vast majority of Russians struggling to make ends meet.
And struggling with, let's be honest, the very issues that should be addressed by those in power. Rising costs of living, healthcare, education, all those things.
It almost feels like a betrayal, doesn't it? Like the very resources that belong to the people are being used against them.
It's definitely a sense of broken trust, that's for sure. And it makes you wonder, if this is happening in Russia, is it happening elsewhere too?
That's a good question. I mean, is this just a Russia problem? Or are we talking about something bigger here?
Well, this particular story focuses on Russia, but the reality is that corruption and wealth inequality are global issues.
So it's not just Sechin and his buddies.
Right. It's a much bigger problem than that. We see similar patterns of behavior, abuse of power, and enrichment of the few at the expense of the many, playing out all over the world, in governments, corporations, institutions, you name it.
So we're really talking about a systemic problem then, not just a few bad apples.
Exactly. Corruption, in its various forms, is woven into the fabric of many societies, and addressing it requires us to look beyond individual actors and examine the systems and structures that enable this behavior.
This deep dive really has taken us down a rabbit hole, hasn't it? We started out looking into the lifestyle of one man, and now we're talking about global systemic corruption.
We have, and it's a reminder that these issues are interconnected and complex. There are no easy answers.
So where do we go from here? It all feels kind of overwhelming, Like, what can we as individuals actually do about something this big?
It's easy to feel that way, for sure. But it's important to remember that we're not powerless. Every individual has a role to play in fighting corruption and promoting justice.
Okay, I like that. So what can we do? Give us some actionable steps.
First and foremost, educate yourself. The more you understand about these issues, the better equipped you are to identify them, talk about them, and challenge them. Read that article we discussed, do your own research, stay informed about what's happening in your community and in the world.
Right, so knowledge is power. Got it. What else?
Support organizations that are working to combat corruption and promote transparency. There are a lot of great groups out there doing incredible work, both locally and globally.
Yeah, and even small donations can make a difference.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of your voice. Talk to your friends and family, write to your elected officials, participate in protests and demonstrations. Use your platform, however big or small, to speak out against corruption and advocate for change.
I think sometimes people forget that. They feel like one voice can't make a difference. But it can, especially when we join our voices together.
Exactly. Collective action is crucial. And don't be afraid to challenge those in power, to ask tough questions, to demand accountability.
Hold their feet to the fire.
Exactly. And never lose hope. The fight for justice is a long one, but it's a fight worth having.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been enlightening, to say the least. And we hope it's inspired you to learn more, get involved, and use your voice to make a difference.
Because we all have a role to play in building a more just and equitable world.
That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll be back next week with another fascinating story. Until then, stay curious and stay engaged.